Have you ever been in a situation where you've gone for a job interview or a presentation, a sporting event, or maybe you've had a big event, or maybe you've gone to a party, or maybe you've gone to a family gathering and you felt slightly anxious or anxious? Now, one of the things I do with my clients, the people I coach people in business, in sport, I help prepare for interviews, I help people prepare for presentations, for big sporting events. One of the areas I work with is breathing. Before I do any cognitive work, before I do any hypnosis or any other coaching, one of the first things I do is do breathing exercise. Now, assuming all things are okay, we know anxiety can have many underlying issues, and one of the protocols I use is before, even if it's a performance goal like preparing for an interview or for a presentation or anything like that, I'm not a medical person, so I refer the person to see a medical person first, just to explore if there's anything else that could be going on, because we know anxiety can be caused by many underlying issues. Not being a medical person myself and working with the mind, I want to be reassured, I want the person at least I'm working with to have some reassurance that, okay, there's nothing else going on. But let's say all things being well and all things being good, even when I'm working in performance-related areas like preparing for interviews and coaching and that sort of stuff, one thing I do is help them with breathing. And what I do with helping me breathing, I get them to breathe deeper. People who've got anxiety or performance anxiety tend to breathe higher, because what tends to happen, it's not the event itself, it's the meaning they give the event. What I mean by that is you have the event or the situation, then you have your thoughts about the event or the situation, and that has a knock-on effect emotionally, behaviorally and physiologically. And I do work on a cognitive level and beliefs and their thoughts and so on and so forth, and the meaning they give in the situation, but I also work on their breathing too. And the breathing is really important, because let's sort of look at the breathing for a moment. Automatic responses, where people who've got anxiety, performance anxiety, generally breathe higher up. And by doing that, they're sending a message to their brain that they're in danger. Just like, for example, if there was a vicious dog running at you and you're afraid it was going to bite you or attack you, you'd automatically, the sympathetic nervous system would kick in automatically, and you'd have a rush of adrenaline in the body, the fight, flight, freeze response, you'd run, you'd fight, you'd freeze, or you'd flop even. Our heart rate would automatically escalate, and that's primal. Now, millions of years ago when dinosaurs roamed the earth, we had automatic response, were danger, we'd fight, freeze, or run, and we still have that capacity. The amygdala, the part of the brain in the limbic system, it's automatic, it's implicit, so to speak, and people who've got anxiety generally breathe high up in the chest, and by doing that, they tend to hyperventilate. And by hyperventilating, they go into more crisis and they release more cortisol, more adrenaline, and so on and so forth. Now, one of the things I do, I get people to breathe deeper through the abdominal. And by doing that, the parasympathetic nervous system, which is part of the autonomic nervous system, kicks in. And by doing that, you're sending a message to the brain that all things are okay. So, okay, you breathe deeper. For example, you can place hands on your stomach, and just breathing in naturally and normally through your tummy. And if you're comfortable, you can breathe in through your nose and out through your mouth. If you're not comfortable breathing in through your nose, or you can just breathe in naturally through your mouth, whatever's comfortable for you, and just breathing in naturally and normally at the rate you're comfortable breathing in. And by doing that, you relax and you're sending a message to the brain saying all things are okay. You're reducing the heart rate, the sphincter muscles relax and calm down, and it can help us a lot by doing that. And I get people who've got performance anxiety to practice that. Now, what I do is get them to practice holding their stomach at first, for the first 3 or 4 days. After 3 or 4 days, it becomes automatic. It becomes an unconscious competence. They'll do it on their own. But for the first 3 or 4 days, they can practice as much as they can. Now, when it's safe to practice, I wouldn't advise someone to practice when they're driving or in the shower, they'll end up swallowing water. So whenever they're watching a passive TV, if they're, for example, just going out their daily business, they've got a time out, they can just breathe, and by doing that, it can help them a lot. And I'll get them to go away and practice that daily as often as they can, and holding their tummy. And you can follow me for, say, 30 seconds or so, just breathing in naturally and normally, and as you breathe in naturally and normally through your stomach, you notice your heart rate slowing down, and your breathing slows down, your sphincter muscles relax. And that's quite useful to do that. And for example, I mentioned earlier the sympathetic nervous system. If we saw any danger, so you got cut up on the road or a dog was chasing you, it'd kick in normally. So it's useful to a point, yet we know the primal brain doesn't always work well in the modern environment because we've got a lot of perceived dangers. Now, they're not the same dangers we used to have all those years ago, but the brain can't really differentiate between a dinosaur and the chronic agitation or stress that we face in the modern day, like bills and deadlines and stuff like that. Now, certainly performance anxiety, it's not so much the process, it's the outcome. So if I'm working with a top class footballer and they're anxious in a big cup game, they could train every day and they could take 100 penalties, for example, every day and score 99 in training. Then in the game, it's the outcome. What's riding on the outcome? So it could be a big final, 100,000 people watching them, millions around the world, and it's the only chance they've got. Will they make it again? And all these things go through their mind, just like a job interview. It's not about the job interview. So if I don't get the job, I won't get the promotion. If I don't get the promotion, I'll end up not finding a job. If I don't find a job, I won't be able to pay the bills. All that sort of thought process that goes through people's mind, that then has a big impact on us emotionally. And then the emotion has an impact on our behaviour. We become erratic and we don't perform at our best. And physiologically has an impact too. Our heart rate goes up. So we can do strategies as well, behavioural strategies. We can do physiological strategies, walking, breathing. We can do behavioural strategies. There's plenty of those. I do some of those with hypnosis and NLP and CBT and mindfulness even. You can do emotion work around that as well. You can explore people's beliefs and cognitive. And that for me is a little bit more long term for the person you're working with, because if that's what's going through their mind, and people who've got anxiety can say some pretty nasty things of themselves that would make anyone anxious in any situation. And focusing on the process is quite useful too, in reverse to the outcome, because sometimes we get caught up in the outcome itself as well. So the presentation and the brain being really implicit, for example, is quite unique. And I'll give you a really quick example of implicit responses. So I was working with a woman one time, and every time she'd get home from work, she'd go into a really anxious state and she'd just lock the door and social avoidance, and that would have an impact on her behaviourally. And she'd seen coaches before, she told me she'd seen therapists before and wasn't really getting anywhere or getting the results that she wanted. So I did some regression with her and took her back. And as it happens, when we regressed her, she found that the dog next door would bark, or she'd noticed or become aware of the barking unconsciously, and that would trigger an implicit response, because when she was a 12-year-old, she got bitten on the leg by a similar type of dog with a similar type of bark, and there was the implicit association there. And equally, when I was working with someone years ago, another example, this girl was doing some training with me, delivering training with me, and she was assigned to deliver training with me. It was some CBT training for staff in care homes, and we were doing some CBT training. She was assigned to work with me, and on the first session with me, she got mostly good feedback. It was 19 out of 20 members, students anyway, gave her great feedback. There was one person who wasn't very kind, very generous with his feedback, and it really played on her mind. The following week we were delivering some more training. She said to me, "Well, I can't do it, Jim." And I said, "Okay." And I spoke to her and so on and so forth. And I suggested to her at that point, we sort of, to cut a long story short, we looked at the way she was thinking, and she was magnifying the negative, she was personalizing it, and there were a number of cognitive distortions that. So I set up a Gallup experiment for her and said, go to a speaking group and speak to people who've started on their journey in speaking, just to help normalize it. So she understood that it's normal to feel that way to a point, but obviously if the outcome is she wants to carry on doing what she's doing, and she's very talented, very bright, that's one of the issues that she had. So when I did some regression with her as well, I took her back, and she went back to a time in her life where she was very young, and at school she got in trouble. She was goody two shoes and very academic, and she got in trouble for not doing some homework. So she got sent to the front of the room by the teacher, and there was the implicit response of standing in front of a group, and that negative feedback kind of opened up an old wound, an old schema, so to speak, and that really had a big effect on her. She improved, and she went on to become a great speaker and a great trainer, and things worked out for her in the end. But going back to what I said before, for me, before I go in that area, one thing I do is I work on the breathing, and by doing the breathing, then we can start doing it automatically. It has a big impact, I think, on the person's ability to feel calm. Now, I generally don't use the word relax with people who have got anxiety. The reason being is that they've probably heard that word a million times before. And they've probably told themselves a million times before, just relax. And people saying, can you just relax? So I don't use the word relax. If I give them a hypnosis to work with and to go away and do, if they come back and say the hypnosis was relaxing, then I'll use the word. If they come back and say it was nice, I'll use the word nice. If they come back and say the hypnosis was very peaceful, I'll use that word. I won't impose the word relax on the person who's got anxiety, because obviously they've heard it before and they've got the association with that word anyway. Yet what we're covering today, and hopefully you got something out of it, is the breathing, and by breathing deep is quite useful. So I'll do some more videos in this series, and I'll talk more about the cognitive side. I've got some videos out there that do that, and feel free to email me, I can email details on that. But I certainly emphasize that this is for educational purposes only, and for me, anxiety, there's general anxiety, performance anxiety, many different types of anxieties, different types of causes, and I think ultimately in the end for me, certainly as a coach, one thing I do before I take anyone on that area is I want to get the all clear, because I'm not a medical person, just to make sure there's no underlying issues that could contribute or that could be helped with. And I'm not suggesting that if there is, we can't do anywhere with them. We can, at least we give them the best possible chance to succeed, and chances are they're okay, but it's better to be safe than sorry. But one of the first areas I work with certainly is the breathing, and just to reinforce that, by breathing deeper, because people who've got anxiety, they tend to run all sorts of things in their mind, and it's not the event, it's the interpretation of the event, what it means to them, or what meaning they're placing on the event, because nothing means anything other than the meaning we place it, and their thoughts have an impact on their feelings, their emotion, their behavior, and so on and so forth. And the thing I do before I sort of go down that road, the cognitive side, and help them with their mind, is just breathing, and because the person's generally breathing quite high up, and that's sending that message to the brain that there's danger. Sympathetic nervous system kicks in, and a bit like when you get cut up on the road, or you get some bad news, and you sort of fight, flight, freeze, and the adrenaline's pumping and the heart's racing. To calm that down, breathe deeper, just at what the person's comfortable doing, and that's quite useful. And in the beginning I get them to hold their tummy, and after a while they get used to it, they can do it without that. So thanks for watching.